Okay, dear friends, let's do a little bit of parsha. When you go out to war, what war are we talking about over here? So there are two types of war in Jewish law. We have a milchemet reshut, a optional war that a person can take, and there's also a milchemet mitzvah. That is a war that a person does in order to fulfill the mitzvah of conquering the land of Israel of the 7 nations. That is the war that destroys those people who are not willing to give us the land. And we are told by Hashem, which is basically this one occasion of it actually, when we first entered into the land of Israel. That is a milchemet mitzvah. There's an obligation to go in and wipe out those nations. Remember, there were 7 nations in the land of Israel when Yeshua took over the leadership. And Moshe Rabbeinu said to him, remember, when you go in, right, give them the chance for peace. If they don't want to do it, then that's fine. There was actually one of those nations, or maybe it was part of one of those nations, called the Gibeonite. And this group, a very interesting group, they wanted to stay in the land of Israel, but they didn't want to go to war against us because they knew we had the Torah and the mitzvot. They did something. This is all actually explained in the book of Joshua. You know what they did? You know the story? It's an unbelievable story. No, they didn't convert. They did something else very, very different. Or maybe eventually they did, actually. It could be what they did. But what they did was they tricked Joshua. They faked him out. It's a fascinating story. What they did was, they knew the Bnei Israel were coming in. Some actually left and went to, there's a group that went to Africa. Many people did leave. Most of them just stayed to fight the Jewish people, saying that, we want to stay in here, this is our land, and we're going to destroy you. They weren't willing to make peace with us and to come under our control. But this group of the Gibeonite, they tricked the Jewish people, and they dressed up as though they'd come. Have you heard the story before? It's an unbelievable story. They dressed up as though they'd come from miles away, i.e. outside the land of Canaan. And they took their bread and they made it very, very moldy. And they emptied out all their water canteens as though we've come from far away. And the top said, listen, we're not one of the nations who are here. We just want to live in the land peacefully with you. May we stay. And he said, you're not one of, he goes, no, we are a different nation. We're not part of this land. Actually, they were. They were one of the 7 nations. So they made Joshua sign a peace pact with them, saying that we would let them live in the land and they're going to follow all the rules and all the halachot of the land of Israel, and they could remain in the land itself. Okay? Right after they signed, what do they say? We're actually one of the 7 nations of the land.
So then the contract's voided.
Oh, is it a mekach ta'ut? Is it considered to be a voided contract? You would have thought, yeah, because the contract was made under false pretenses, precisely. And you know what he should have said? He said, well, you know what? Fool me once, you're not fooling me twice. And this whole thing, he should have ripped it up. He said, no. He said, we signed it in good faith. We were tricked, and they held to this contract that was held above their heads, and they said, held it onto, they said, no, no problem. You can remain over here in peace. If the story ended over there, it would all be well and good. But something even stranger happens. The remaining nations in the land of Israel, in Canaan, the remaining nations, they turn around and they're like, you just made peace with our enemy? No, we're not going to have that. So all the remaining nations in the land of Canaan, listen to this, all the other nations said, we're now going to attack these people. And they went to the Gibeonite and they started to do war against them. And this was discovered by Joshua and the remainder of the Jewish people. What would you think Joshua would do at that point? At that point, he's like, look, I'm not going to attack you because you made me sign a contract. Although it's a fake one, you made me sign it under false pretenses that you're not from this land. That I'm not going to do. But come on, what do we do now? This is your fault. You deal with it. You're the one who wanted to go through this entire situation. You should deal with the situation. Joshua said, no. We made a peace pact. Everyone who makes peace with the Jewish people is now under our wing. Listen to the level of devotion that Yeshua gave towards this Canaanite nation who tricked him into staying, and they actually went to war in order to defend this group of people in the land of Israel. It's an extraordinary story. If it wasn't written in the Sefer Yeshua, you'd never believe it. And that's precisely what happened. They went and they defeated and they let these people join the Jewish people, and they were given work, right? Because whoever joins us becomes part, has to do work, and they became water drawers and woodcutters, which is considered like, the lowest level, and they became part of the Jewish people at that time. Extraordinary. That is, I always think about it, even in today's circumstances. You want to come to war against us, one thing, but if you want to make peace with us, we'll go out of our way to protect you because you become part of the umbrella of God's protection in the land of Israel. It's an unbelievable story. Okay, yeah. I mean, today you could say the same. The Drusim join us. Very good analogy, right? These people have their own religion, and whichever country they live in, we end up taking care of them, and they live in actually in other countries, and they fight in our wars, and they live in our land, and they are considered full-fledged citizens of the land of Israel. It's very simple to join the Jewish people safe in the land of Israel. Don't kill us. No sedition. That's pretty much it. Don't be treacherous. It's really, the bar isn't that high. You know what I'm saying? It's just a matter of just living under our laws, doing your job, paying your taxes, and you'll be treated as an equal member of our nation, which is very untrue for other nations. The mitzvah in this parasha is a very strange mitzvah, and this is to be understood. Because basically, it's about when you go to war in a voluntary war, a milchemet reshut. Now, what was that about? Why would any king create a voluntary war? Why would he do such a thing? So it's the king's decision, because the king is the political leader of the Jewish people. The Navi is the visionary, and the Kohanim are the spiritual leaders. But the king is the political leader. He had to make decisions that would protect, just like the prime minister of Israel today. Right? It can be deeply unpopular, but he's got to make decisions that are going to protect the people of his land. That's his charge. That's what he's got to do. And that is what a melech had to do. However, a melech could do a number of things. They could also increase the size of the land of Israel. You know this? They could actually push back the boundaries as far as they think is needed in order to create what we call I guess today you call it a buffer zone, in order to protect the land of Israel from other armies and other nations. That is the military aspect to it. Lubavitcher Rebbe, however, says something much, much deeper. It's an amazing, unbelievable idea. He says, no, there's much more to it than that. He says, Israel is kadosh, right? It's kadosh. And when we say it's kadosh, it means it's holy. Kadosh means holy, separate, apart. The more Israel you have, the more kadosh you have in the world, right? It's an amazing idea. So when you extend the land of Israel, what you're actually doing is bringing more kedusha to the world, because you're increasing the amount of kedusha in the world. So what a king was also doing, besides the fact he was protecting himself, was expanding the land of Israel in order to increase the amount of kedusha, because every footprint, every piece of land takes on the kedusha that is ascribed to it by making the land larger. So a king also was able, on a spiritual level, to actually increase the land of Israel, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in order to keep it kadosh. Then we come to a very big discussion, which I will mention, and that is, are you allowed to give away land for peace? What takes priority? This is a very famous discussion that people always discuss. So Lubavitcher Rebbe actually mentions it they bring it down in one of the Chumashim. He says that technically it is permitted to save Jewish lives, because the life is the most important thing. However, it never does that, and therefore it should never be done. So many people think, he said it's mutar, and he says, technically, sometimes you have halakha mitzvah, which technically are correct, but in action they're not. So technically you could be around, you know what? In order to save a life, I'll give you this, but it's got to be a proven, effective remedy to save a Jewish life, because the most important thing is a life, more than a piece of land, right? Because Jewish life is higher than the land of Israel. Having said that, it never works, and therefore should never be done. And many other great Rabbanim, right? I think the Chazon Ish also was asked this, I believe, I read this recently, weirdly enough, in one of those shul handouts. He says, it may be permissible, but it's highly inadvisable. And we've seen right now, right, we gave Gaza away, or in 2005, I think it was, and I was actually there for that withdrawal, and the months afterwards and the years after, I would go and visit with the groups, and terrible. The consequences of that we're really seeing right now. They would literally make it into a military base, right, on our border, Rahman al-Islam. So that's a big, big thing. While this battle is happening, now this is very difficult for us to hear, but this is the mitzvah. There is a situation we have an Eshet Yifat Torah. This is a beautiful woman, who is captured during the battle. Happens. Remember, when you fought battles those days, you didn't go, it wasn't like it is now. Right? You're going for a week, 5 weeks, 2-3 months, right? Come back, have a shish kebab and go back. It wasn't like, when you went to war, you left home for years. I mean, wars took a long, long time. I will mention that the final war, when Mashiach comes, different opinions. Some say it may take as little as 30 minutes. Some say even a few minutes. The Vilna Gaon has a tradition. Maybe it comes down for a few minutes. Okay, so what that war involved, we don't know. But wars in those days took a long, long time. Okay? Many, many years. So you're away. You're on the battlefield. Now, what would happen is these women who were living in these towns, in these cities, were now bereft of their family because their husbands, whatever, they've gone to war, they're fighting, and they would die. So what they would do is they would dress themselves up in order to attract another male. Because I know it sounds weird, but marriage nowadays is all about love. Right? But back then, and for a long time, marriage was about, I need someone to sustain me. Right? And it's going to take care of me. That's what marriage was for a long, long time. A provider. Okay, we're not really in that world pretty much anymore, but that's the way it was. And so these women would dress themselves up beautifully, and they would come forward and they'd be like, okay, I want to. So says the Torah, okay, fine. If this woman wants to, and she wants to convert and become part of your people, that is permitted. It is permitted. You are allowed to. However, there's a number of things you're going to have to do to get to that point where you marry her. This, say the rabbis, is the Torah speaking to the Yetzer Hara of a man. Because he's there, he's in the throes of battle, this woman comes up, he's been away from family, and he has urges. Torah says, fine, you want to marry her? No problem. But you're going to have to go through some stages first of all. First of all, you have to see the real person, and you have to let her grow her nails out, her tzipronea, says the Torah, and she has to take off this fancy clothes that she put on, and you've got to let her mourn. She's mourning the loss of her family. Who knows who she's lost in this battle? So this woman has to be given a chance, as the Torah, to mourn those people she's lost. Okay? That is one thing. Plus, you have to give her a full month of that, and after that, she can become an isha to you. She can become a wife to you after she's been through this entire thing. The rabbis say the initial throes of passion that a man may feel at that time, thinking that he could take on this woman, because remember, at this time, you could be married to more than one woman. Okay? Let's remember that. That's the Torah. According to the Torah, right? About 1,000 years ago, Rabbeinu Gershom sent to the Ashkenazim. That is not permitted anymore. He lived in Europe about 1,000 years ago. He says that's not permitted. You're not allowed to more than one woman. But according to the Torah, you're allowed to marry more than one woman. Okay? Interestingly, the Sephardim, for the most part, were not makabel this. And you see many, many Sephardim who actually did marry women. I was actually in Israel a number of years ago, and I visited an absorption center of Ethiopians. Okay? They were a little different because they were definitely more outside the Jewish world, the mainstream world for a long time. Right. But even the Yemenites, when they came to Israel, and whenever it was in the 40s or 50s, 60s, whatever, they came with multiple wives. So I was there with this Ethiopian family, and I saw that it was this very elderly gentleman, must be in his 70s or 80s, hard to tell, with his elderly wife, and he's there with his young daughter. So I'm talking to him, and I said, "Oh, so this is your daughter." So he said to the translator, we had a rabbi with us, right, who had to speak Amaraki, what's it called? I can't remember the exact language it's called. And he said, no, this is his other wife. So the rabbinate in Israel had a big problem. What are we going to do when all these Sephardim, who are not makabel the gezerah, the decree of Rabbeinu Gershom, not to marry more than one wife? What are we going to do with them all? So they decided, you know what? They can remain married to those multiple wives, but they cannot marry new ones. So the law of Israel right now is, you're not allowed to marry more than one. That's according to the Rabbanut. That is Asur, according to the Rabbanut in Eretz Yisrael, even for a Sephardi. But there are people walking around today in the land of Israel with more than one wife. And by the Persians too. There are Persians that turned up in the land of Israel, and they turned up from Yemen, and all these places turned up, and they're like, nope, that's it. What you got you can keep, but you can't marry more than the ones you have right now. So back then, they were actually marrying multiple wives. So he was able to take this woman in and take care of her, and that's what she wanted. It sounds crazy. And many of these times it did actually work. These women actually converted, became legitimate members of the Jewish people. Question I get nowadays is, if a woman converts, right, because she falls in love with a man, does that work? So many bate dinim, many courts of law will not convert a woman who they think is joining just because she... But the truth is, it does work. And there are bate dinim, even today, right, who will say, yeah, if that's your motivation, but we still have to see you becoming a legitimate member of the Jewish people, which involves, right, taking upon yourself Tariag mitzvot, all the mitzvot, being Mekabel Shabbat, and all the laws. You don't need to know every detail of every law. I've been involved with a number of converts over the years, right up to the end, and they ask him questions, right? And they ask him, we did Hilchot Borer, they ask him questions on Borer, and as for this, they don't need to know everything, but they need to know enough to just kind of get by. And how do you really convert, let's be honest? The Jewish people, although we're a Torah of mitzvot, it's a culture, and it's a community. You have to become a member of a community. So I get a lot of emails. I get an email every single day from some individual in Iran. I don't know who he is, but every day writes to me and says me a thing. He wants to become Jewish. I said, if you're not part of the Jewish community, it's not going to happen. I said, you can find the Jewish community that's in Tehran today. It's it's small, right? But I'd be careful because I don't know what the consequences are in the land of Iran today in order to want to become part of the Jewish people. I'm not sure. It could be okay. You know what I'm saying? But you need to become part of a kehillah. So we have people who write from all over the world. Someone in China wrote to me like a few years ago. You have to become part of this. This woman, we learned, had to become part of the Jewish people. Like, oh, you're Jewish now, you know what I'm saying? Right? And that's it. Put a mezuzah on your door and Shalom Yisrael. It's not the way it is. You had to become part of the kehillah. So the Torah is saying she can, but you have to let it go. The Torah, the rabbis, they expect that this woman in the time of war, she's acting out of desperation. So they want to calm the situation down. And that's why the Torah is speaking to the Yetzirah of the soldier and saying, okay, let her mourn. Let's see her without all this fancy clothing and makeup, nice. Let her just live her life. Let her mourn. And, people don't look so attractive when they're mourning. You've ever seen a mourner in a Bet Avel? And then the Yetzirah is going to disappear. But it didn't always. And they took them and they became part of the Jewish people. And some of our greatest heroes and heroines were actually Gerim, were converts. Okay? So that is this parasha of the, and she has to be treated very, very, very well. In those days, today as well, people are treated like chattel, like property they would sell. And the Torah says you're not allowed to sell her. You would think, okay, I own this, but I can sell her. There's no such thing. You're not sell her, you cannot enslave her, right? Because you inflicted her. The Torah agrees and understands, right? Asher inita. Inita, you've afflicted her. How you afflicted her? You went to war, destroyed her country, right? Her family was fighting and everything, and they made the wrong decision by going to war against us. And this is the consequence. That is the level of, just compare it to other nations. Other nations, for thousands of years, even today, they go in, they kill, they pillage, they rape, and they light the whole thing up. That is not the Jewish way. We go to war because war is part of this world. That's what we're dealing with over here. But the way you treat your prisoners, right? Once you take them in, unlike Lahavdil, how Hamas treats our hostages, and the prisoners, they kidnap and leave from us, is an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace. It's interesting. I just did Sefer Daniel. You came to the Shirim, some of you. When Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first Beit HaMikdash, he actually kidnapped hundreds of Jewish children. We don't know how many. It could be thousands. We just know 4 of them. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. We mentioned them in Selichot today, right? Because Hashem saved them when Nebuchadnezzar threw them into the fiery furnace. He did that actually because there were people who were jealous of these Jews and snitched on them to Nebuchadnezzar, who threw them into a fiery furnace. Miraculously, they survived. The angel Gabriel went in to save them and pulled them out. So that's why we mentioned them in Selichot, right? Because even the worst circumstances, we could be saved. That's why we put in Selichot, right? And then Daniel had a similar problem, that he was saved from the lion's den. And he was also snitched on by other people who were living in Babylon at the time. You see? So these men were actually children. They were kidnapped, but they were treated extremely well. You know that? They were treated extremely well. They were fed the best food. They were given the best accommodation and the best teachers. Why? Because Nebuchadnezzar says, I've attacked Israel, I've destroyed their temple, but why do I want to kill the people? He was a smart man. He's like, I want to create a brain drain. I want to take the choicest Jews, bring them into Babylonia, and by the way, it worked, and make them into my advisors. And I'm going to give them the best training and everything. Daniel said, I know we're stuck here, and by the way, he'd lost his family, his parents, who else? No, he lost. But he turned around and he said, but I'm only eating kosher food. And his 3 friends, who probably were not originally, started to eat kosher food, no lobster, in order to be successful, and they were. They became, great prophets. And Daniel ended up becoming an advisor to 7 or 8 of the kings of his day, right? In order to do that. Okay. So even Nebuchadnezzar, right, realized the value of treating prisoners well. You can use them in a positive way. You hear what I'm saying? And that is lahavdil, but that is also a Torah idea here as well. Okay? All right, Kindlech, it's 20 minutes. We'll stop over there. Have a great, successful day.